Hi everyone, it's Emma. Today I'm going to talk about what it means to read for yourself instead of reading, following the hype or following the general excitement over books and things. I'm basically going to be talking about what I've been learning to do with myself. I didn't feel like putting my contacts in today, so you guys are getting glasses, Emma, which it might reflect a little bit, but I'm sorry. First of all, this has nothing to do with the topic of the video, but I realized that I haven't mentioned in one of my videos that I will be attending BookCon next weekend. By the time this video goes up, it will be a week until BookCon, so I will be there. So for those of you who will also be there, feel free to come say hi if you want to talk or whatever. I'm bringing both of my brothers, so I know they look intimidating because they're very tall and stuff, but I promise they're very nice. Don't let them scare you away. Now on to what I actually wanted to talk about during this video. So, my reading journey has been kind of different. In high school, growing up, I read a lot of classics, way a long time ago when I started reading for fun. I read Percy Jackson and Harry Potter, but I didn't really discover the genre of YA until a year ago when I started reading all the series and getting caught up on all the series. But up until that point, I mostly read Jane Austen and F. Scott Fitzgerald and classics that were my favorite books, and that's what I loved to read. Then I discovered YA, and I was like, there's this whole genre that's so exciting, and there's so many series that I can get caught up on, and it was so much fun. So for the past year, I've read mostly exclusively YA, although I have read some other things as well. I did read majority YA books and majority YA fantasy books. And now it's been a year, and I'm just a little bit tired of reading the same things. It's not that I don't like YA anymore, because I absolutely do love it. It will probably always be my top genre, if not, or maybe my second favorite genre. But I found that I was reading all the books that were new releases, or the books that everyone was talking about, and the books that everyone was enjoying, and that I wasn't necessarily enjoying them myself. Sometimes I was. Sometimes they became my favorite books, and I was super happy about it. But there's so many new releases, and there's so many hyped books, and a lot of times the hyped books are not hyped for reasons that I will actually like the books. I've been thinking about this a lot because within the past month, there's been a lot of new releases, and I've felt that pressure to read the book as soon as it comes out. For example, Lord of Shadows came out a couple days ago, which is my most anticipated book of the year. I loved Lady Midnight, and I've been looking forward to Lord of Shadows for a long time. So I reread Lady Midnight, and I finished it the day Lord of Shadows came out, and I went to the mailbox to get Lord of Shadows, and I was so excited. And then I sat down with the book, and I realized that I didn't actually want to read it right now. But I was going to read it anyways because it just came out, and it seemed like that's just what you do when a book comes out. You read the new release as soon as it comes out so that you're not spoiled and so that you're reading it at the same time everyone else is reading it, etc., etc. But I sat for a second and thought and realized that that was not what I was in the mood for at the current time. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to read Lord of Shadows, because obviously I'm going to. I'm really excited to find out what happens to these characters. But I realized that at this present time, it's not what I want to read. And then I had the dramatic realization that I can read whatever I want, and that being intentional with reading is really important. And I get caught up in this mindset of like the crowd and what everyone's reading, what everyone's buying, and feeling like that hype mentality. And then I forget to actually stop for a second and think about what will actually bring me the most joy to read. So I did that, and what I actually decided I wanted to read were a couple books. The first one is Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. This is a poetry style book, and it's the author's like memoir basically, about her life growing up. And I've been wanting to read it for so long. My mom read it, loved it, and I just know I'm going to love it. And this book, Rani and Jamil, is blurbed by this author. So, like, I know I'm going to love it. But I hadn't been reading it because I kind of had gotten caught up in, like, all of these other books that I felt pressure to read. And so I decided to read it because, yeah. So as soon as I decided to read this book instead of Lord of Shadows, I felt so much less pressure. I realized that I had complete control over making decisions about what I want to read, and that I don't need to do what everyone else is doing if I don't want to. And it doesn't mean that I'm never going to read Lord of Shadows, and it doesn't mean that I don't like YA books anymore. Some other books that I'm also going to read. I'm going to reread Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. This is one of my favorite classics, and I've only read it once, and I think it was 2 years ago. And it's so short, but I really would like to reread it now because I'm such a different person than I was 2 years ago when I was like 17. I would really like to reread it and like be curious to see what I think now. And then the last book I decided I wanted to read is Demian by Herman Hesse. I'm not sure if that's how you say it. It's The Story of Youth. Demian, The Story of Youth. Again, I've been wanting to read this for a while, and I just haven't because I've been caught up in all these other books. So I'm going to read those 3. They're all pretty fast reads, kind of classics. Anyways, I told you guys this little story of what I've been thinking about because I want to encourage you to fight that mindset of too many books, too little time, fighting the idea that you have to read everything and that, like, you'll be happiest if you read most, because it's just not true. Take a minute to think about what type of reading brings you joy and be willing to change on a day-to-day basis. Like, if you're in the middle of a book and you're not enjoying it and you don't feel like it is bringing you, if you don't feel like it's uplifting you, it's okay to not finish that book. There's no rules to reading. There's no, like, you have to do this, you have to do this. It feels like that sometimes, but reading is just for fun. Like, we're not in school now. Like, if you're not reading a book for school, obviously, then you have no pressure whatsoever to read anything. Sometimes what brings you joy might be the new release that just came out to that series that everyone is talking about, but sometimes it might be rereading one of your favorite books that you've read 3 times, but you also just want to reread it again because it brings you so much joy. For me personally, I often find that I most enjoy those books that I've been anticipating the release after the hype has died down a little bit. For me, the hype ruins the book just a bit. A lot of times I've found that, like, a lot of times I will read a book years after it came out when there's no hype left anymore. Like, I did this with the Shatter Me trilogy. I read it last year, and I, like, wasn't really hearing anybody talk about it. And I loved it so much because I had no expectations. I didn't know anyone was liking it. I didn't know that it was, like, a series that had been really hyped about because I was brand new to YA. And I absolutely loved it. But I definitely believe if I had read it in the middle of all the hype, and if I knew that people really had loved that series a long time ago, I don't think I would have liked it as much. I really think that, like, yeah. But that's just my personal reading taste. What I'm trying to say... That's just my personal reading taste, but what I'm trying to say is that you have the freedom to make decisions in your reading life in whatever they may be. Like, you can... You can read in whatever way makes you happy. If that means reading all YA contemporaries, or reading all fantasy books, or reading all short books, or reading all long books, or reading 1 book a month, or reading 13 books a month, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you take the time to, like, do the things that make you happy, including your reading life. So, yeah. It's definitely something I've had to remind myself again and again and again now that I'm in the Booktube world, because I always read just on my own. I didn't have friends that read, really. I read in my family, like my whole family read, but I had no pressure. And then I got into YA, and then I got into the Booktube world and Bookstagram, Twitter, and all of that. And it has changed my reading life a lot. And I want to adjust more to my own personal reading tastes within the Booktube world and bring to the Booktube world, like, what the books that I actually really love to read. And I'm not saying that, like, all the books I've read for the past year haven't been things I've loved, because I have loved them, but at this point in my life, I'm ready to read because that's what I wanted to be reading at the time. But now I'm having to adjust to realizing that that's not what I want to be reading right now. And that your tastes change, like, every month. Some months I feel like reading classics. Some months all I want to do is read poetry. Sometimes all I want to do is read manga. Sometimes I just want to read contemporaries, and sometimes I just want to read, like, one really big fantasy book and have that be the whole month. So, yeah. Basically, I'm saying that you should try to... Okay. Basically, I'm saying that there are no rules to reading, and there's no you should do this. There's no, like, requirement. If everyone's reading a book, it doesn't mean anything for you. And if everyone's not reading a book, then you can still read the things that you don't hear about. So, I'm not sure what I'm going to title this video. I think it's going to be, like, reading for yourself, or ignoring the hype, or something like that, but catchier. Let me know down in the comments if you guys feel this pressure to read hyped books, or to not talk about books that everyone else is reading, to read hyped books, or if you, like, get caught up in that mindset of there's too many books and I don't have enough time to read them and I'll never be able to read all the books that I want to. Okay, no. I hope you guys enjoyed this little chatty reading lessons video with me. If you did, please hit the subscribe button. I'm Miss Emma Reads That on all of my social media, which I will link down in the description box. Especially if you're going to BookCon, please go let me know on social media that you'll be there, and, you know, keep up with what I'm doing or whatever. I post videos every Wednesday and Saturday. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time with a new video.